Chris O'Connor here. Join the Curmudgeon Rock Report's invite-only curmudgeonly community at facebook.com/curmudgeonrock. Also look out for a Spotify playlist that pays honor to this episode.
This is the Curmudgeon Rock Report, and this is your podcast made by rock geek iconoclastic outsiders for rock geek iconoclastic outsiders. For those of you who lament that rock music has gone the way of jazz and slipped into niche genre status, we are here to keep that flame alive by providing insight, analysis, recommendations, and honest takes, not hot takes. And hey, there's a good chance you'll learn some rock history you never knew before. For years, professional wrestlers have entered the ring with entrance theme music. In the old days, the songs tended to be borrowed from other sources, anywhere ranging from classical to rock music. Starting in the 1980s, though, that changed. Down in World Championship Wrestling, a Dallas, Texas-based promotion affiliated with the NWA, the bad guy trio known as the Fabulous Freebirds had an all-original song written for them by one of their members, Michael Hayes. They even filmed a video and released it as a commercial single. It didn't take long for Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation, a New York-based promotion that would go on to conquer the world, to have original entrance theme music written for his wrestlers. Soon after, it became commonplace for pro wrestlers to have original entrance theme music, and now it's pretty much the norm. Yes, yours truly, Curmudgeons, both Chris and I are huge wrestling fans, and it's a surprise that it's taken us this long to inject wrestling in some way into this podcast. But here we are. So, if you're a wrestling fan yourself, kick back for a little while as the Curmudgeon Rock Report brings you the 10 greatest original wrestling entrance themes.
Bart, if longtime listeners couldn't tell that we were kind of Aspergery/severe ADHD-ish before now, this episode will leave no doubt into our odd interests and our encyclopedic knowledge of interesting stuff.
Yeah, especially stuff that probably most of our listeners don't like, which is pro wrestling.
Yeah, but we're trying to turn people on to this, and the music of pro wrestling is very important and has been for 40 plus years.
Sure.
It helps, pro wrestling is a show. You could say that it's fake. I mean, not really. Those guys are beating the shit out of each other. Basically, it's how wrestling is the art form in which you pretend to beat people up. Basically you are beating people up without actually injuring them.
It's a theatrical performance with a lot of athleticism.
Yeah, and a lot of like slamming guys down on plywood.
Yeah. Or
actually lumber. No, those are 2x4s that are
underneath the canvas. Yeah.
Underneath the mat. Yeah. And so it's not, these guys are good, but the music adds to the pageantry, and it can also help tell the story, as we'll get into with a few of our selections for these great wrestling themes. But hey, before we do that, let's stick to, the actual like music promoted as music stuff and go over into the parallel universe, baby. For the 138th time, we are crossing into the parallel universe to discover a world where rock and roll and popular music and just basically the stuff that guys our age and newbies too, because of programs like School of Rock, the kind of stuff we're all into is still big over there. Like basically cock rocking guitars and swagger, and where everybody still wants, everybody I guess in this world still wants to be Freddie Mercury, but in the parallel universe, Freddie Mercury is immortal. He never died. And so that's a long way of saying that this is the segment of the show where we cover new and newish artists and albums by folks that we think that you would really dig, or that we're vibing onto and would love to share our enthusiasm for. That said, our first pick is actually perfect for a parallel universe because it's retro as fuck. Right, Arturo?
Yes. Oh, for sure. The Heavenly Bodes and their debut album, Green Hills. Hailing from Cornish, England, the Heavenly Bodes are a lo-fi sound-loving garage rock lovers Wet Dream. First, this debut album is no mere exercise in retro lo-fi sound quality fetishism. This band actually recorded this record in 100% analog fashion with an old school reel-to-reel tape machine. Second, this is no mere 1960s retro revival guitar band. They take a little bit from the dreamy surf rock of A La La's and infuse it with the wild eclecticism and spiky energy of the early work of the Choral. Give that combination a healthy dose of LSD for psychedelic sheen, and you have a surprisingly original record. Highlights include the rollicking hillbilly boogie of De Groin Huvels, the Green Hills in German, and my bad German pronunciation. Groovalicious riff rocker that mutates into chunky jam midway through of Faux Pillars. The ear-splitting psych rock a la the 13th Floor Elevators of Spitting the Pips Out. And the album-closing 1-2 punch of Edward's Allotment and The Heavenly Bode that are alternately drenched in spacey dread, yet with the latter track rev up to a climactic end. Overall, it's a very good album that portends a bright future for this charmingly mysterious band. 4 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, I like this album a lot too. And the band's website, if you go to it, it kind of gives away the game. They describe themselves as West Coast Garage Psych.
Yeah,
that pretty much is it. If this is the San Francisco division of the Nuggets box set is kind of what they're going for here. But in a way, it's kind of cool because like De Groin Huvels is basically psychobilly, right? I mean, that's it's basically the Cramps. Yeah. And so they have some stylistic diversity within this. You know, it's not all like 10 covers.
That's what saves them. That's what makes them like really entertaining to listen to, is that they're not a cut rate, run of the mill retro revival garage rock band. They have a lot of
in other words, they're not doing Cherished by the Association and Incense and Peppermints
over and over
again. Yeah. And in some respects, I almost call it garage emo because there's a surprising emotional depth to some of the stuff they're doing. Yeah, you mentioned a few of my favorites too, Spitting the Pips Out. I also like National Express, which is a really good little ditty, like a pop garage ditty. This isn't really a complaint, but one thing, I admire these guys' commitment to the gimmick, going so far as to use, like, I guess, probably hearkening back, you got to be like 55-year-old, 60-year-old analog reel-to-reel equipment, like you're talking vintage equipment, using that. But one of the sacrifices of doing that is that the vocal performances kind of get lost or kind of get buried in the mix.
It's muddled. Yeah,
it's faint.
But it's okay when the music is good. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, not all the time, but in some of the performances, it's right. the vocals get lost, and so. But that, that's a little bit of a quibble. You mentioned the Choral, by the way. It's worth mentioning that the Choral have just put out a few months ago. They put out their best album in years, called 388. I encourage people to go check that out. It's essentially garagey early 60s R&B. It's basically a doo-wop without the 4-part harmonies. It's really a strange record, but it's cool. Basically in this genre of garage psych revival, the Choral's 2002 self-titled debut is probably the best, or one of the best albums of that revivalist genre for sure. I know you introduced it to me back in 24 years ago, and my immediate reaction is, "What the fuck?" And I remember you and I just giggled when we heard it, and then once you got over the fun factor, then it's like, "Wow, that's a good album." But yeah, so this is these guys are contenders. I mean, they're obviously young, and curious to see how committed to the gimmick they become and how they develop as songwriters. Right. So let's transition.
Another British band.
Yeah, Arturo, question for you.
Yeah,
what is your pick for the worst new rock band of the 2020s? And by new, I mean their first album came out in the 2020s.
The band you're going to talk about now.
Yeah. Okay. I should have said besides Greta Van Fleet.
Well, they're 2010s. They came out in the 2010s.
That's what I mean. But they have a new single out that's by far the worst thing they've ever done, which is fucking saying something.
A lot.
Yeah. So anyway, your pick is who I'm going to talk about next. And yes, that band is Dry Cleaning. Coming into 2026, Dry Cleaning would have been my pick as well for the worst new rock band in the world that came out in the 2020s. This English band's 2020 album, or 2022 album, Stumpwork, was genuinely awful, as in piece of shit. It was basically muddled, inane, gibberish spoken word poetry recited by a hipster sea hag who couldn't be bothered to stay in tune with the stock music quality post-punk and phony Smith's backing tracks. Simply, the shit was a mess and was hard to take seriously. That explains why, for most of the year, I ignored the release of Dry Cleaning's latest album, Secret Love, which came out, I think, like the second week in January. And it didn't help that Victoria Siegel, critic for the magazine Mojo, fawned over this album in a horribly written review. Really, it was like, it was almost like performance art. Like, I'm going to write just as bad as Florence Shaw. Might have been the exercise. But hey, a funny thing happened back in a few weeks ago, late in July. As I do about once a month, I checked YouTube for the latest live performance videos from KEXP, the Seattle rock station that I adore and that you should adore too. And there it was, a recently posted video of an in-studio, the audio engineers for KEXP are amazing, by the way. And so they have their own performance studio there at the radio station. And they had a performance from Dry Cleaning. So I figured, what the hell? Let's see how bad this shit is. And in the shock of 2026 for me so far, what I heard was actually pretty great. Now the band sounded great with surprising punch and muscle and wow tunefulness. And vocalist Florence Shaw, looked really hot, and two, actually sounded like she was a real member of a real band, reciting her poetry to the beat. Wow, imagine that. And also adding some textured speak-sing to her mix. So then, I finally checked out Secret Love, and wouldn't you know, after repeated listens, I now love this album. The credit for this magic trick goes largely to Kate Laban, the Welsh artist and increasingly in-demand producer. During that KEXP appearance and the interview afterwards with Cheryl Waters, the band credited Laban with being an emotional connector and an intense perfectionist who demanded dozens of takes at times. Seriously, the bassist was lamenting the 75 takes that she led him through at one point. The bandmates didn't really say this on that KXP video, but I will. From the sounds of it, Laban taught this quartet how to be a real band. And damn it, she did a great job of it. You might as well just start calling her Saint Kate because of this. Throughout Secret Love, the band crackles and pops with a newfound energy that at times makes these songs genuinely exciting. Post-punking, yes, but at times jangly and even mysterious. More importantly, Florence Shaw sounds genuinely engaged and emotional throughout the album. Gone mostly is the shy mutterer of silliness and scatology. Laban must have been something of a soul sister and counselor in the studio, because now Shaw sounds really sexy, especially when she sings several of these songs' choruses. She actually sings. And hey, even the one genuinely dumb song on the record, Evil Idiot, is really funny, as Shaw expounds on her love and perhaps fetish for burnt food, as the band provides a really cool, damn near trip-hop-ish backing track. Here, and on other songs on the album, Tom Dowse proves to be a really ace guitarist and almost frighteningly original, one whose tones and lead lines sync with Shaw's newfound depth of feeling. Other highlights on this album include album opener Hit My Head All Day, a genuine banger on which Laban infuses drum machine accompaniment that juxtaposes wildly well with Dowse's reverby squonks. My Soul Half Pint, on which guest Jeff Tweedy, yes, that Jeff Tweedy, indulges in his nastiest lead guitar work in ages. Seriously, now that Nels Cline is the dominant guitarist in his band, you don't really hear Tweedy have this much fun playing electric guitar. Then there's the boldly melodic thumper of a title track on which Shaw achieves her most pronounced femininity to date. The Cute Things, a swaggering romantic swinger with an extremely Smithsy chorus. And then I Need You, an affectingly ethereal meditation by Shaw on the giddiness of new love, on which Laban adds lovely layers of synths. I should offer a couple of caveats here. The streaming services have available a deluxe edition with 3 additional songs, none of which are nearly as strong as the stuff on the actual album, and there is one lapse into sloppiness on the record. The muddled and terribly mixed Rocks, which should rock, but put Shaw's voice annoyingly way too high in the mix. But these aren't showstoppers. Dry Cleaning Secret Love is otherwise a tremendous breakthrough for this band, and a testament to Kate Laban's genius for elevating the music of other people. This band sucketh no more.
Think of that. The objects outside their head control the mind. To arrange them is to control people's thinking.
Simply put, this is one of the worst bands in the world, and Florence Shaw is the least talented front woman in rock history. Most of what's bad with this band can be attributed to her. She cannot sing at all, and to compensate for that, she affects this supposedly cool but ultimately pretentious stance of a spoken word, quote-unquote, artist. The problem is that she delivers her spoken word performances in the same monotone voice, song after song. There's no variety of vocalization nor any kind of rhythmic quality. She has no range to her vocal delivery. She has no sense of timing. She has no sense of phrasing. Even worse, her lyrics are obnoxiously terrible. They're just abstract, nonsensical gibberish, at least with the band's early albums. There are a couple of songs on this new album where one can ascertain some substance, such as Cruise Ship Designer, which is a commentary on toxic masculinity and its obsession with showing off.
Yeah, that's a good song.
Evil Idiot is an indictment of fascist oligarchs and the predatory nature of the internet. But for the most part, sorry, Chris, it's more of the same from Shaw. Yes, there are a couple of songs where she actually attempts to sing. The key word here is attempt, because she really can't. As for the band itself and the music they make, they have some moments where their take on post-punkish indie rock is compelling, sometimes hooky and even a little heavy. But they aren't consistent enough. And for the most part, they tend to plod and meander as a dreary background to Shaw's even drearier vocals and lyrics. The best musical thing on the album you spoke about earlier, Chris, is the song Rocks. And even that's ruined by a dreadful mix where the band is too low and Shaw's vocals are too high. So much for that supposedly great Kate Laban production. Yes, Secret Love is an improvement from their god-awful first couple of albums, but that's like saying roasted worm larva is better than raw worm larva. Fuck this band. Fuck the British music media that has inflated their review metrics beyond reason, and fuck their fans. As for Florence Shaw, in the song Joy, she tells listeners, don't give up on being sweet. Sure, Florence, I'll try that, only if you don't give up your career as a visual designer. 2 stars out of 5.
Oh, tell us how you really feel. Chris here again. We usually end our episodes by inviting you to join our Curmudgeonly community page on Facebook. Well, we're picking up our efforts there. Know people just as passionate as us about rock and roll? Invite them to join in the fun. You don't actually need our permission to do so. Also, expect to see a lot more content up there moving forward. Our mission is to engage you, so darn it, we'll engage you like a fire hose, or maybe like a firehouse if we're going to give love to Gene Simmons. We may also be making a few offers. Want to wear a t-shirt featuring our logo? You may have that opportunity soon. So be a fellow curmudgeon, help us expand our little community, and share your own musings via your own posts. We're at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeon rock. Well, so folks, we're talking about theme music from pro wrestling, professional wrestling, or as the founder of the World Wrestling Federation, now known as World Wrestling Entertainment, Vince McMahon calls it sports entertainment. Both of us became fans back when we were about 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old. A lot of that coincided with the rise of somebody that I know everyone has heard of, Hulk Hogan, in the WWF, who became that swaggering American hero, ripping the shirt off, like telling you to say your prayers and eat your vitamins and all of that. And, from there, I think we both kind of traveled a similar path. We discovered the wrestling magazines, otherwise known as Apter Mags. And all of a sudden, we realized there was a whole other world, a deeper world of professional wrestling, where things were more focused on the wrestling rather than on like Hillbilly Jim doing a hoedown in the end, or Uncle Elmer getting married. And so then, it just became this kind of deep thing. There was the good guy versus bad guy thing, but there was also the storytelling and, the comebacks and all that. And it was just, I don't know, for some reason, it just was riveting the more we got into it. And as you get into it, you realize there's two things about wrestling. It really is entertainment, and there's a lot of potential for silliness and comedy. And my wife watches wrestling with me once in a while, and they'll hit a spot, and she'll be like, "This is stupid," to which I'm like, "No, this is fucking great." So there's a wrestling fan, there's a shtick that wrestling fans appreciate, and to that, and the music is a big part of the shtick. That, as we'll discuss, entrance music, has a couple of roles in wrestling. One, it advertises to you as quickly as possible who's coming down to the ring. So even if you're in the middle of a match and somebody, like a good guy's getting beat up and another good guy's going to make the save, when the music hits, then that adds to the excitement because you know that your favorite guy is coming down to save the day. That's part of it. But also it can add to the wrestler's shtick or gimmick or character, that it can help tell the story and either lift the audience's adoration of the wrestler or add to the heat for the bad guys, also known as heels. And so, evaluating this music, it's not like saying, hey, Sgt. Pepper's is one of the greatest albums ever made. It's like, no, this is awesome for being part of the show, for enhancing the character and entertaining the shit out of us. So with that said, Art, we have an honorable mention section to this top 10 before we get going, right?
Yeah. First, one of the first ones we had to cut was the Honky Tonk Man's theme, Cool, Cocky, Bad. The Honky Tonk Man's gimmick was that he was an evil, dastardly Elvis Presley impersonator. Written and produced by Jimmy Hart, this was actually credible 1950s rockabilly. Yep. The lyrics pretty much include every Elvis and Buddy Holly trope you can imagine. And Wayne Ferris, the Honky Tonk Man's real name, actually sang the song himself and doesn't disgrace himself. It's an actual catchy as hell song. Chris?
Yeah, Jimmy Hart. So there's going to be a couple of names that come up over and over again on this list that we have. Jimmy Hart is one of them, and Jim Johnston is the other. Johnston was the head he was hired specifically to write music for their artists, and he worked for the WWF for like 30-something years. Jimmy Hart was a manager, but in the 60s, and I can't remember the name of his band, it might have been the Gentrys, but he was part of a band out of Memphis that scored a modest kind of minor hit back in the early 60s. So he had some success there. He became friends with Jerry Lawler, who was basically the big promoter and big star in Memphis wrestling, became part of the show, was an awesomely obnoxious manager, but he also brought his musical talents to bear, and he wrote dozens of songs. Anybody he managed, he wrote the music for. He wrote the music for other folks as well. Really talented guy who understood wrestling and brought that in. And so, yeah, So you want an obnoxious song for an obnoxious Elvis impersonator? Jimmy Hart can do that, and he can do it well.
Yeah. Next, another one that didn't make the cut, and rightfully so. Randy Orton is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. His entrance theme, not one of the greatest ones of all time. It's genuinely iconic because he's been using it since 2008, but the song Voices, written by Jim Johnston and performed by the Long Island, New York band Red Theory, is just third-rate derivative emo metal that only the lowest common denominator of emo metal idiot fan can like. I've always felt Orton deserved better than this. Chris?
Yeah, but at least in the first two to 5 seconds when it comes on, you know who's coming, and so you're excited. And that's again, that's why it's a little bit different evaluating wrestling themes. You listen, and the people sing that song. You know, the fans that pay the money are coming in, and they're singing that chorus as he's going down to the ring. So obviously they're engaged with that, and it does enhance Orton's character. But yeah, you know, as a piece of music, it's one of Johnston's lesser songs.
Yeah. Another one that didn't make the cut, The Rock, i.e. Dwayne Johnson, was renowned for his catchphrases, and he incorporated them into his entrance theme music. The problem is The Rock has so many variations of his entrance theme that it's hard to land on one and say, this is one of the best ones ever. Personally, I prefer the original, more subdued one, where he simply asks, do you smell what The Rock is cooking? Just that one. Chris?
Yeah, me too. And yeah, I mean, it's cool bass line, and obviously with that, if you smell what The Rock is cooking, he was so hot back in 99 and 2000, 2001. That always is, you know, assured to be one of the biggest pops or audience reactions of the night. And so, you know, and it actually kind of fit him. You know, and obviously the version of it that they rolled out a couple years ago when he came back was way different and way less engaging.
Yeah. And then finally, what didn't make the cut was in the 2010s, a bunch of big name wrestlers had their theme songs written and produced for them by WWE's at the time in-house production team, the CFOs, with the S as a $sign. Personally, I think the vast majority of their music was terrible. They did a good one for Shinsuke Nakamura, as we'll talk about in this episode, and they did a decent one for Kevin Owens. But for the most part, I've always felt their music was inorganic, plastic/fake, childish, and rather cartoonish. Chris?
I love the CFOs, man. They did a bunch of great stuff between 2014 and 2018. You know, like Finn Balor's his music, and just has this like awesome kind of like symphonic metal thing to it. It just like rocks. And then when you put that together with Balor's various entrances, including the one you don't like, the Demon, it just really added to the show. He did the New Day's theme song, which, you know, at first was not that great, but once they turned heel, totally added to the act. I believe they did Sami Zayn's theme music, which is like a ska-ish, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones thing. You know, so like I said, they had, and then my personal favorite of theirs is there was a character that was wonderful in NXT and then bombed on the main roster, Adam Rose, that was basically a goof on Russell Brand and Club Kids, but it was just this like and it was just so cheesy and so over the top that it was great. So I really like the CFOs. You know, we'll talk a little bit about. They now work with this outfit called Def Rebel, which is just terrible. They basically just make stock music that has no life to it. But the CFOs at least got what they got the assignment, which is to, you know, have something like catchy and something fun for the wrestlers to introduce them. So yeah, I mean, that's just a difference of opinion, but I like the CFOs.
The CFOs are the reason CM Punk continues to outsource living
No, not really. Remember, CFOs haven't done anything for the WWF since 2018 or 2019.
Yeah, but CM Punk was in the WWE in the 2010s.
Yeah, but before the CFO, well, the CFOs came on board starting in like 2013, 2014. But the thing is, well, you know, with Punk, that's kind of an unfair criticism only because, dude, Living Color allowed him to use Cult of Personality. And that by far is the coolest like ring music anybody's ever used.
Yeah.
but it's licensed, which is why it's not on this list.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's not an original.
Yep.
All right. So now let's get into the Curmudgeon Rock Report's picks for the 10 greatest original wrestling entrance themes ever. Number 10, we are going with the Rougeau Brothers, All American Boys.
Yep.
The fabulous Rougeau Brothers were a French-Canadian team that turned heel, wrestling parlance for bad guy, in late 1988. And with their change in attitude came a change in theme music. Their gimmick became one of a couple of sarcastically patriotic all-American dudes who were subversively mocking the U.S. The song, written by Jimmy Hart and J.J. Maguire, is hilariously corny, synth-driven Europop, with the wrestlers singing the song themselves. We don't like heavy metal. We don't like rock and roll. All we like to listen to is Barry Manilow.
Yep.
Perfect.
All American boys. All American boys. We're all American boys. All American boys.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. I mean, yeah, that line still cracks me up. And yeah, and this is what I said before. This is just awesome heel music. And the idea is, if you have a couple of, obnoxiously over the top French Canadians pretending to be now patriotic Americans, this is the song that you hit them with. And it's really, like you said, it's that synth pop thing, but it's got that like really funny chorus, like funny bad chorus. Yeah, all American boys, all American boys. And so it just was great. And I just saw a video when I was researching this episode that Bruce Pritchard, who's one of the top creative guys in WWE, and he's been in and out of the WWE for about 40 years and was Vince's right-hand man for years, tells a story about the gimmick, which when they turned him heel, it's basically what they did is they told Ray Rougeau that your brother is like this really over-the-top, obnoxious guy. So what we're going to do is we're going to enhance that. We're going to tell Jock to be a bigger version of himself, and then you're going to do an impression of Jock. And with Jock not really being in on the joke. But he also talks about how, like, Pritchard was at the Stanford thing when Jimmy Hart was doing it. Jimmy Hart wrote it in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Came up with it. And he actually sings the chorus. The original, like, Jimmy Hart's got vocals on it and that were overlaid by the Rougeaus. And this was kind of a funny thing because the Rougeaus basically, like, they put Montreal wrestling, that family put Montreal wrestling on the map. And so without the Rougeaus, you don't get artists like Sami Zayn and
Kevin Owens,
who are both from Quebec. And so, but they were like white meat baby faces the whole time. And then Vince challenges them to be heels. And I think without the song, it wouldn't have worked as well because not only did they have the song, they would come to the ring like waving like they kind of like if anyone remembers the like chains like Bennigan's or the Ground Round, the kind of like little American flags that they would like stick into your burgers. They would come down waving those. Really, really funny. Yeah. So we had to give it up for the Rougeau brothers here.
Number 9, John Cena, The Time Is Now. When Cena started out, his gimmick was that of a bad guy white boy rapper who would enter the ring freestyling his insults of his opponents. I actually preferred this version of Cena, the professor of thugonomics. When he got the big babyface push, he became a live-action superhero, beloved by children who went by his credo of hustle, loyalty, and respect. Basically a Hulk Hogan for the naughties. The Time Is Now is what, from here on out, became his theme song. It's a middle-of-the-road slice of commercial hip-hop, doesn't have any real bounce or menace to it, and I've always thought it to be corny. However, it has become an iconic entrance theme for the simple reason that Cena became iconic himself, so it's on the list.
Yeah, corny was the point. As you said, Cena really rose to prominence and got over with the fans when they gave him a heel white boy mall rapper gimmick. And he was great. Like, he would come out, like, he would go into, if he was doing a show in Boston, he would come to the ring in a Roger Clemens Yankees jersey. Yeah, or one time he was in Boston, he came out with a Wake Forest Tim Duncan jersey, and he would do stuff like that. But he had the visor, he had the chain, which in his case it was like a padlock on a chain, which is really funny, and just basically, Andy could freestyle his promos,
Yeah.
which he did himself. So really talented, really fun. And then as he started to grow, he basically switched gears a little bit and turned it more into, like you said, the swashbuckling hero. But the song served a purpose. Again, this is another one of those songs. Yeah, it's kind of corny, but it's got a great first 30 seconds. It
Right.
has that build up. It's a sample from New York Queens group called MOP, which is just fun. And then it hits with those horn notes. And so, Cena comes out, does the salute to the crowd, shows the towel that has hustle, loyalty, respect on it, says hi to the cameraman, throws the towel into the ring, and then sprint out to the audience and then sprints to the ring. So it was a really exciting entrance. And, there were a lot of people that hated on Cena, but Cena was great because half the crowd would boo the shit out of him. And then he would go in and cut a promo. And then by the end of the promo, everybody was cheering for him. So
Yeah.
nobody could handle hostile audiences like Cena. And so, yeah, so this song, which was done, the whole album was kind of a parody of like Marky Mark,
Yeah, totally.
basically. But it was credible. And the other funny thing is that his co-rapper on a lot of the songs from the album that this came from is his cousin Mark, who went by the worst handle I've ever seen, the trademark. Yeah, Mark ending in the C.
Yeah.
Corny as fuck. But again, that was kind of the point. So yeah, we have to give it up for Cena because of the act and because of what he meant for them for so long. Nobody stayed on top longer in WWF history than Cena, and
Right.
this
Right.
music was part of it.
All right. Number 8, Shinsuke Nakamura with The Rising Sun. I make no secret that I'm not a fan of modern day wrestling entrance themes, modern day meaning from the 2010s onward. Most of them are just too cartoonish and even childish, especially those in the women's division. But when this legendary Japanese wrestler joined WWE in 2016, the company's in-house music production team, the CFOs, we just talked about them, did him well with this rousing, dramatic track. It merges elements of traditional Japanese folk music, i.e., all that exotic stringed instrument stuff, with lots of build-up and tension and release.
Yeah, great piece of music. It's like, really kind of cool violin performance. And actually, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was like a fairly popular African-American violinist is the one that plays on it. And it really is a virtuoso performance, but it has those, beginning guitar notes and the skittering drums. And
Right.
it's just really exciting and really kinetic. And then you put it with Shinsuke Nakamura, who is charismatic as hell.
Right.
Ugly as hell, but charismatic as hell, who could do body contortions to go along with it and make it look like the baddest entrance ever. One of the greatest things I've ever seen in wrestling was his debut for the WWF in NXT back in April of 2016 at NXT's pay-per-view in Dallas. He was having a match with Sami Zayn, who's another genius of the ring. And this was the first time a lot of us that weren't really fans of New Japan got to see Nakamura. And what do you know? The first thing we see is him coming out, and there was like a strobe light show, and Nakamura doing all of this sort of like Japanese kabuki movements, and then comes to the ring, and it was like the most fucking awesome thing. And I remember the crowd chanting "Holy shit" for like 2 minutes, and then from there, Nakamura and Zayn basically they go on to put on one of the best matches of the 2010s, probably the second best match in all of WWE in the 2010s, or well, third best. There was Cena and Punk from 2011, and then Sasha, Banks, and Bayley from 2015. But I think Nakamura Zayn's right behind it. And so just genuinely exciting, and it fit the character. It fit Nakamura. And this is why, I mean, the CFOs were at their best, they were great. Yeah, like you said, some of their stuff was corny as shit, but this really hit.
Number 7, Shawn Michaels with Sexy Boy. Written by Jimmy Hart and J.J. Maguire, this song was actually sung by Michaels' kayfabe manager Sensational Sherry when Michaels turned heel in early 1992. Shortly after, he recorded his own vocals for it, and ever since, that's been the definitive version. His persona of the Heartbreak Kid was that of an arrogant yet charismatic egomaniac who loved to flaunt his sexuality and bragged about how good he was with the ladies. It's a campy character, and this song is appropriately and wonderfully campy as well.
I think I'm cute. I know I'm sexy. I've got the looks that drives.
Really, really campy. The original version was great because it helped tell the story because Sherry Martel was his manager.
Right.
And so it's his manager as the fangirl singing it. So it really added to the act. But yeah, like I said, this is Jimmy Hart and J.J. Maguire again, like writing a song that was like perfect for the character and, just kind of fit. And it had that, like you said, campy, but also like, kind of based on like teeny bopper music from the late 70s, almost like a Leif Garrett song,
Yeah.
Sexy boy, and all of that. And then, Michaels, kind of rode that persona when they turned him face a couple years later and became, the biggest star in the company. And this music was part of the accompaniment.
Right. Next, number 6, Demolition with Demolition. Another Hart Maguire composition. This song was actually sung by noted rock musician Rick Derringer, he of rock and roll hoochie coo fame. Even if they were a ripoff of the Road Warriors, they needed a theme that matched their monster heel, super badass, Mad Max-inspired bikers from hell persona, albeit bikers wearing oddly homoerotic S&M gear.
Yeah, exactly.
What we have here is something that grooves and pounds like a legitimate Black Sabbath outtake. I'm convinced the awesomeness of this track is part of the reason the fans learned to love them and them turning babyface later on.
Here comes the ass, and here comes the smasher, the demolition, walking disaster. Pain and destruction.
Yeah, this is an example of music helping an act get over with the fans.
Yeah.
Awesome piece of, like you said, when they first came in, Hart and Maguire did like a more generic version of this.
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, because, they had a relationship with Derringer because Derringer produced the first, he produced both the wrestling album and the wrestling album 2.
Yeah.
He was the main producer. And so they had the relationship with him and they said, hey, what if we got Derringer to come in here and like redo this a little bit and make it rock balls?
Yeah.
And he does. So let's talk a little bit about Rick Derringer, by the way. So Derringer goes back to, the 60s song, Hang On, Sloopy, Hang On. Yeah, that's him. And his old garage rock band. And so he had a hit from early on. Then he went on his own and just did some awesomely rocking stuff. He had the song Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo in 1972 or 73, which is an awesome rocker. He actually, if folks are familiar with Steely Dan Showbiz Kids, that's Derringer, not Skunk Baxter, on the slide guitar solo on that, which is just nasty as shit on that. And, he just had various other things that he had going on. He actually produced Edgar Winterband's Frankenstein, which is one of my personal favorite. He doesn't play on it, but he produced it.
Right.
So one of my favorite classic rock songs. And so, when it came time that they wanted to do this wrestling album and do that, Johnston was like, hey, maybe we can get Rick Derringer. And so Derringer came to the table. And so when after they did the second, and it might have actually made the second, well, no, that was, Demolition at that point. I think it made the second wrestling album. He kind of redid this song and just thunderous guitar, like just really great singing. And then it has this and another Derringer song that we'll talk about on this list. Both have incredible solos on them. Like in wrestling, you rarely play the whole song.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times he left his solos to the end, so you almost never heard them in context of the show, but they're awesome. So,
Yeah.
and like you said, the S&M gear must have been a fucking rib from McMahon. That, like you had these two guys, you had the mass superstar Bill Eadie, and then you had Barry Darsaw, whose previous gig was playing a Russian named
Yeah,
Crushing,
Crusher Khrushchev.
even though he went to high school with a bunch of guys in Minnesota, in Robbinsdale, Minnesota. But coming in, and so they want to do a takeoff on the Road Warriors. So what the hell? Why not put them in like ball gag gear? Like studded leather. That was just really, really funny. So yeah, great piece of music.
On this episode, we gave you our picks for the 10 greatest original entrance themes in pro wrestling. For the next episode, we're getting our glitter on. In the early to mid 1970s, the UK produced one of the most important and influential subgenres ever introduced to rock music, glam rock. The sound was bright, bold, decadent, overtly sexual, and sometimes self-consciously artsy. The look was androgynous, flamboyant, theatrical, covered in makeup and glitter, and yes, glamorous. It also gave us some of the greatest, most enduring music by some of rock's greatest acts. David Bowie, T-Rex, and Roxy Music, just to name a few. Join us next time as the Curmudgeon Rock Report provides a review of the essential glam rock albums and singles in The Glory of Glam Rock, 1970 to 74. All right, now we go numbers 5 through 1 in our 10 greatest original wrestling entrance themes. Number 5, The Undertaker. Rest in peace. The Undertaker had one of the greatest gimmicks in wrestling history. An otherworldly demonic mortician in zombie form, he got his mystical power from a mysterious urn held by his manager slash father in kayfabe, Paul Bearer. Paul Bearer, get it? He was also tall as hell, strong as hell, intimidating as hell, and a pretty good in-ring worker, depending on who you got him in the ring with. This track is the sound of ominous, impending dread and doom. The perfect soundtrack to The Undertaker's slow walk down the aisle. It's almost as iconic and famous as the wrestler himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally added to the character. It's like you said, the zombie Undertaker that came down, and he had, the rubber gloves. At first, he wore the rubber gloves, and then the long black coat and the hat, and and the brimmed hat and all of that kind of stuff. And it was like a spectacular entrance because they used to do like light shows, and they would add in what looked like lightning and all of this.
Right.
And so this is a song that also has had a bunch of variations over the years. The original thing was basically a riff on Chopin's Funeral March. Dang, I can't even do it. But basically, you all know it. It's the Funeral March, and it's classic funeral stuff. And so it kind of ripped on that. But the one constant of all these versions is the gong in the beginning.
Right.
The church bell
Right.
at the beginning, and that's been maintained. And that was one of those that what they could do is the lights would suddenly go dark. You'd hear that church bell. The whole crowd would go nuts. You put the house lights back in, and the Undertaker's magically in the ring.
Yeah.
Would attack a guy. It would go dark again. The gong would go off. Lights come back on, and whoa, he disappeared. Yeah. So kind of cheesy, but fun. It was cool. It was cooler, and it had a right to be. But like I said, over the years, Jim Johnston wrote this. Really great gothic stuff, and then it eventually got like an organ treatment and strings and this sort of grand. There was a rock version of it where almost like this sort of marching, sort of stomping guitar riff that was sort of down in the mix. And so, but all the variations were cool, but it's that gong and the Funeral March riff that really define this and help build that character. It's one of the greatest gimmicks in history.
It is. It really is. Number 4, Bret the Hitman Hart with Heart Attack. What started as the entrance theme for the Hart Foundation, one of the greatest tag teams of all time, consisting of Hart and his partner Jim the Anvil Neidhart, became Hart's very own when he became a full-time singles wrestler in 1991. He would go on to have one of the most legendary careers in wrestling history, taking part in some of the industry's greatest, most iconic, and most important matches. His character was that of silent charisma, cool, detached, sleek, dark, good-looking, and roguish enough to fit in with what fans wanted in the 1990s. His theme is exactly that, with its screeching guitar intro leading into a strutting groove that's just too cool for everyone else. And yes, another Jimmy Hart, J.J. Maguire track.
Yeah, like I said, Jimmy Hart was really prolific, and yeah, his thing was, and he continued it on in WCW. He would write the theme music for all his guys. If he was your manager, he would write the stuff. And this happened with Bret, and it was perfect for Bret, like you said, that kind of cool, detached, icy kind of guy. And this is just like this badass little riff and stomp, and like you said, that screeching little guitar note at the beginning. And it just fit the Bret thing where, he would just kind of stomp, like almost strut to the ring and then take off the sunglasses off his greasy hair and put it on a smiling little kid. And then kid's too little to say, dude, why the fuck do you have all that shit in your hair? and why are you putting your sunglasses on me? So, but the kids were enamored and, they were not that discerning at that age. But anyway, yeah. And like you said, Bret's one of the best wrestlers of all time. And so it was theme music befitting of a wrestling star.
Yeah. Number 3, the Fabulous Freebirds with Bad Street USA. I may be wrong, but this is very well the first instance of wrestlers, in this case a faction or team of wrestlers, who helped craft their own original entrance music, spinning it off into both a music video and a commercially released single. The song itself perfectly reflects the heel nature of these guys and their persona. Southern white trash who are unapologetically nasty, criminal-minded, full of attitude, loved to party and cause trouble, and would take your girlfriend in the process. In the early 1980s, their feud with the white meat All-American babyface Von Erich brothers was the feud in all of pro wrestling, and the Freebirds were the perfect foils. It's a feud that still resonates with wrestling fans today, and the Freebirds theme, written by the group leader Michael Hayes, is practically the sound of that feud and that era. It's a damn credible and catchy rock tune, too.
Yeah, as far as I know, this is the first time that the wrestlers wrote their own music to come down to the ring with. Because at that time, this is down in Dallas, and like, you want to talk about hot crowds. The hottest crowds ever in wrestling were the ones that hit the Sportatorium for the World Class Championship Wrestling's tapings between 82 and 84. After 84, it started to drop off. But between those ages, and like, the Von Erich brothers were absolute rock stars. Women would throw themselves at those guys when they were coming down to the ring. And, Kevin used Stranglehold by Ted Nugent as his entrance music, and Kerry Von Erich used Tom Sawyer by Rush. And, and his nickname was the Modern Day Warrior. Yeah, there you go. But then, then you get the Freebirds that got, for as much of the adulation and the screaming, absolutely bonkers pops that the Von Erichs get, nobody got more heat than the Freebirds. Like literally, like wrestlers tried to stab Michael Hayes, or fans tried to stab Michael Hayes a few times. Yeah. Back when kayfabe was actually, people were still stupid enough to buy kayfabe. And we didn't have Vince telling the athletic commission, yeah, it's fake. But yeah, the video for this, go find this on the internet, folks. And Art actually posted it to our Facebook page. It is the cheesiest fucking thing. With
it's great.
It's like some like dingy, dark, dank, almost like abandoned bar room that Michael Hayes, who's like wearing these like gay looking chaps, leather chaps, fronting this band of these guys that you could tell really couldn't play. The guy who's playing the bassist just like strumming his bass. And then there's parts in black and white where Michael Hayes is looking at the crowd and he's got these crazy, like intense actor over the top eyes and lip syncing. And like I said, the vocals on the track are not the greatest, right? they're kind of weirdly studio altered. But then, so Michael Hayes with this cheesy ass look on his face, like really intense, like really mean look on his face, lip syncing these barely discernible lyrics or words. It's just like it's so cheesy, but entertainingly cheesy, not like awful. Let's turn this off cheesy. But it was just entertaining. And and like I said, when those first couple of notes hit and that riff hit, then they got so much heat. They got so much heat coming down to that. And really, so and so credit. There's a reason that Michael Hayes is like the senior vice president of creative in WWF now, because he was a genuinely creative dude and he came up with this as a way to accentuate the Freebirds' heat. So really important milestone in wrestling is Hayes recording and releasing the song.
Number 2, Hulk Hogan with Real American, quite possibly the most famous of all wrestling entrance songs. You might be wondering why we have it at number 2. We gave serious thought at making it number 1. But if you take into consideration what we know now about Hulk Hogan as a person, the pathological liar who refused to put other wrestlers over, the horrible racist, the Trump supporter, we have to dock Hogan points for being, in fact, a pretty terrible American. But hey, I was a Hulkamaniac in my youth. I had the action figures. I religiously watched WWE's programming on TV, and Hogan simply was wrestling in the 1980s. And this song is one of wrestling's ultimate nad-pumping anthems. Too bad Terry Bollea, the person, couldn't live up to Hogan, the character.
But for the character, this was great. So this is another Rick Derringer song. You co-wrote it with a guy named Bernard Kenny. It's actually Bernard Kenny that sings the vocals. But Derringer, this is probably, out of all 10 of these songs, as a standalone song that you could hear on the radio and enjoy. It's probably the best song on the list, because it's this monster ass riff from Derringer.
Right.
And with a monster solo at the end of it, which again, because it was the end of the song, you rarely heard on the shows. But it's just, and the story behind it is, Derringer produced the first wrestling album, the wrestling album in 1985, or in late 84, really. And he had this song in his back pocket. He had recorded it and hadn't released it. And when they hired him to produce that album, he said, you guys ought to use this one. And so, they put it on the album, and strange but true, it originally was the entrance music for a tag team called the U.S. Express.
Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo.
Yeah, two guys who actually were big regional stars down in Florida, who came to WWF, and they had a tag team that got fairly well over. And so for a couple of months, after they became tag team champion and leading into WrestleMania, though not at WrestleMania, that Real American was their theme song. And then once they got ready to leave, then Vince McMahon or Jim Johnston, somebody had the eureka idea. We really should give this to Hogan, shouldn't we? And and Hogan, it was part of his persona. He was the American hero. He was the 24-inch pythons, eat your prayers, or eat your vitamins. Yeah, eat your prayers. Eat your vitamins, say your prayers, training, and, live well and all of that. Even though, like, during all of this, he was a steroid freak and a Coke freak, and he's telling everybody how to live clean and be good Americans. But you bought it. It worked really well, and it added genuine excitement and added to that character, with that guitar playing, Hogan posing and doing air guitar, ripping his shirt off, and doing all that. I mean, this was like true rock and roll. I mean, this is like the greatest. Hogan had the greatest entrance ever, and the greatest closing match. Nobody ever incorporated his music. Okay, second best.
Yeah,
that ever incorporated his music into his shtick. And so, again, more of a testament to Derringer's talent. This could have been a hit, even if it wasn't part of the wrestling album. If Derringer had released it on his own, it might have become a big hit.
And the number one original wrestling entrance theme song of all time, according to the Curmudgeon Rock Report, Stone Cold Steve Austin with I Won't Do What You Tell Me. Austin is the only wrestler in history, at least in the U.S., who can claim that at the peak of his popularity, he was as big, if not bigger, than Hulk Hogan.
He was bigger.
He started out as a mean, take no prisoners, hard-ass, anti-establishment heel who cut emotionally charged, visceral promos that dripped with anger, disgust, and passion. By the middle of 1996, he had grown organically popular with a large section of the fan base, and he needed an upgrade in entrance music. Enter Jim Johnston, who, on Austin's direct request, composed a song based on Rage Against the Machine's Bulls on Parade. The result, with its glass-shattering intro, police siren, heavy-ass bass line, and guitar riff, is a track so full of swagger, aggression, and menace that it not only captured Austin's persona perfectly, it also captured the pop cultural zeitgeist, with nu metal and heavier rock music in general becoming so popular at the time. This song not only defined Austin's career in sound, it would go on to define the WWE's edgy anti-hero attitude era. Not only that, one can argue that it would go on to define a generational moment in wrestling history when its fan base grew up or came of age. If you don't believe me, watch any Austin match when he came into the ring from 1997 to 99. The pops he got from the audience were so massive and overwhelming that they matched or exceeded anything Hogan got at the height of Hulkamania. And in retirement, it turns out that Austin is a much cooler and nicer guy in real life than Hogan. If you want to open that can of whoop ass, give me a hell yeah.
Hell
Chris?
yeah. So, this is Jim Johnston's masterstroke. That beginning piece, which is basically an amalgam of broken glass and a car crash put together. That's just like the perfect, like sort of in your face, oh, here comes danger note. And it was like one of those instantly recognizable, instantly enjoyable. And like, again, the whole goal of wrestling entrance music is within 2 seconds, you know who the guy is that's coming. And 2, you're excited about it. And, that sound, like Austin was so good in that psycho redneck character, especially when he turned face. And, basically, he went from doing like a kind of a straight psycho, like serial killer bit, which he was great at, by the way. He's amazing heel run in 96 and early 97 to when him and Bret Hart do this, one of the best matches of all time at WrestleMania 13. And they do a double turn where coming out of that match, Bret is now officially a bad guy and Austin is officially a good guy. And then over the course of the year, they establish heat and an issue between Steve Austin and Vince McMahon, the owner of WWE, who at the time, wasn't saying that on the air and was playing the play-by-play announcer, but they eventually switched it over to where McMahon, especially after an incident with Bret Hart where they basically changed the finish of a match to make sure that Hart didn't leave with the belt to competitor WCW. It's known as the Montreal Screwjob. After that, Vince became part of the act as the evil owner and, basically the epitome of corporate dickishness. And he did it really fucking well. I got to admit, McMahon was such a great heel. And so off of that comes Austin, who is the I won't do what you tell me, the guy who gets to live out everybody's fantasy of beating the shit out of his boss on TV. And as part of that, he goes from being the straight psycho killer to being like a beer drinking redneck from the heart of Texas. Basically, he's from south of here, Victoria, Texas, where I am. I'm in Houston, and he was about 2 hours south of here. And so he starts wearing camo in the jeans. They start throwing him the beers, the Steve visors at the ends of his matches and doing all of that. And, that the hell yeah thing. And so he becomes like a psycho redneck. And this was perfect. Now, folks, if you want to understand the power of how music enhances the show and turns the crowd on and kind of like really lead to a Pavlovian, like just frenzy or almost like a euphoria. So in very early 1999, January of 1999, the beginning of that, Raw was taped back in the day, but it aired on January 4th, 1999. There was a title match on the show where The Rock, who was champion, was going to face Mankind, played by a legendarily, ridiculously hardcore wrestler named Mick Foley. And it was one of these things where everybody in the world interfered in this match. McMahon got involved, Shane McMahon got involved, DX, which was a mid-card face group, they got involved. All these people, so it's all this chaos. And it right at the end of this match, all of a sudden, here comes the glass, that broken glass thing. And the video of this pop, this is the craziest fucking pop. The audience literally lost its mind. Austin comes stomping down to the ring, grabs a chair, hits Rocky really hard over the head with a chair. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Does that, puts Foley on top. And Foley, who was beloved by the crowd, referee counts 3, and they go additionally nuts. And then Austin runs off back to the thing. And literally, this crowd lost its freaking mind. And it was because of that music and Austin coming down and saving the day. And it was perfect. There's videos of it all over YouTube. Go look at it. And have we posted that yet, Art?
That video, no. I'll let you do it.
Yeah, okay. I'll find it and do that. But it's the perfect distillation of the magic of professional wrestling and how music fits into that.
Yeah. All right, folks. So there you have it. This podcast's list of the 10 greatest original wrestling entrance themes. So there we go.
Yeah, and if you're still skeptical about wrestling, I'll give you a pointer and advice. Look at wrestling has its origins in what were known as territories. And so St. Louis was a territory, Florida was a territory, Georgia was a territory. And a lot of southern places, Texas, Dallas and Houston had their own thing. And so when you think about wrestling, and it's sort of these morality plays, good guys and bad guys and drama, and basically the best wrestling is when two guys decide they don't like each other and just spend months beating the shit out of each other.
It's basically white trash Shakespeare.
Yeah, that you stole my line. Redneck Shakespeare. So think of professional wrestling as redneck Shakespeare. If you look at it in that light, it may become the most entertaining thing you'll ever see, especially if you go into the archives. The WWE has this amazing channel on YouTube called WWE Vault.
Yeah,
where they dig up a lot of 80s stuff and a lot of stuff, like a legendary guy from the 60s and 70s named Dory Funk Jr. just died. And so they put up a bunch of Dory Funk matches recently. But anyway, some of this stuff and like promos from guys like Terry Funk and Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch and all these guys who were just basically Stan Hansen, who basically were literally a bunch of rednecks from West Texas and going off. That's the charm right there. So redneck Shakespeare, baby. Yep. And with that, folks, as we always do at the end of these episodes, again, this is episode 138. Go to our Facebook page known as the I call it our fabulous Curmudgeonly community. Art keeps us in good content there. A lot of good, cool YouTube stuff. I chime in once in a while. We get pretty good engagement from some of our regulars. Hello, Dan. Hello, Jeff. And a few others. So go to there, facebook.com/group/curmudgeonrock. It's invite only, but chances are we'll let you in. If you have fan mail, if you're a wrestling geek, or if you think that we're ridiculous for covering pro wrestling on a rock podcast, send us some fan mail and let us know how you feel. Cut a promo on us and send it to curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. And finally, we'll have all this theme music and we'll probably throw in some of the honorable mention stuff, and maybe we'll throw in some other stuff that are personal favorites of ours onto a special Spotify playlist, which you'll be able to access in the episode description portion of wherever you get your podcasts from, Apple, Amazon, Stitcher, wherever else, Last FM. So click on that link and enjoy this music and see why we rave about it so much. And with that, as the Macho Man Randy Savage used to say, dig it.